To another tutorial with the Essentials Club. If you are new around here, I am Maddie and welcome. Today we're going to be making a simple pencil skirt with a zip up back and a button over section. I think it's an essential in any wardrobe and super easy to style, and to be honest, I've just really been craving to have one myself, so I thought I would share the steps of how to make it. And if you want to follow along in making a skirt yourself, this is what you'll need to make your own. Obviously we'll need some material. I will put the amount you need per size in the below description of the video. I've got a nice lightweight linen and I'm actually going to line it with just a simple cotton white so that you can't see through. Just about anything will be suitable for a pencil skirt. If anything, maybe nothing too stretchy, but you can go stiff, kind of thin, like cottons, linens, denims, whatever you want to explore. Next, you'll need a zipper. The best way to figure out the length is hold it at your waist down to just past your hips. Unfortunately for me, they only had a longer version in the white, so I'm going to have to use this mint one, but that's fine because that means you guys will be able to see it better. This ended up being an 18cm zipper. Next we'll need some pins, a measuring tape, some fabric scissors, a button, and a paintbrush to help us push out the tunnel that we make for the waistband section. And then we need our trusty old sewing machine. So as you might know, I am a DIY kind of gal and I am always looking for new ways to level up my skills wherever I can. So I'm incredibly excited to share that the sponsor of today's video is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Through their platform, you can explore new skills, develop existing interests, and get lost in creativity. I've actually been a part of their platform for most of this year now and have loved diving into subjects like animation, styling, sewing, and so much more. And in particular, at the moment, I've been loving Plant Queen's lessons on plants at home, as I'm obsessed with filling my space up with greenery, but honestly, I struggle to keep them healthy and thriving. So the learnings from this have been incredibly handy in taking care of my plants. If you're tuning into this channel, I also imagine that you are drawn to learning new skills. So the first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. And after that, it's only about $10 a month. Thanks so much again for Skillshare for sponsoring this video and creating that offer for my audience. Now it's time to jump into learning how to make this skirt. So step one, we need to measure and cut the panels for the skirt. Grab your measuring tape and measure around your widest point. So for me, that's around my butt area. If you're not sure, just wrap it around and kind of shift it up and down until you feel that there's the tightest spot. Once you've found that, don't pull it too tight, just so you can kind of shimmy it around a bit and it's a little bit loose. We're then going to add 4 inches onto that and divide that by 2, and that is going to be the cutting width for our front panel. So write that down as a reference when we come time to cutting. And then to figure out the length of your skirt, hold your measuring tape at the waist point and measure down to where you want it to end. I've got this skirt on as a reference, so I've kind of gone for a similar length, if not just a little bit longer. So once you've found that ideal length, we'll then add 2 inches for seam allowance. We will be adding a waistband on, so we can adjust the length when we get to that point as well. If you're unsure, it's always better just to make it a little bit longer, as it's always easier to make it shorter rather than to add on length later. Now that we've got these 2 points of measurements for our panels, it's time to measure it out on the fabric and cut these out. Measure out your width and your length of this front panel and then cut out this rectangle. Shift the fabric around so that we can now cut out the back panels. We're actually going to have 2 panels so that we can put a zip in the center. And how we'll figure that out is we'll use that front panel as a template, so lay it on top of the fabric section that you're about to cut out, and we'll add 2 inches to the width. So again, cut out another rectangle pretty much similar to the front but 2 inches wider. Once you've done that, remove the template section and then fold this new back section in half and cut it in half, so then we now have a center seam that we can sew up. As I mentioned, mine is kind of like a thinner linen, and I know if I just leave it as is, it's going to be a little bit see-through, and most of the times that turns me off wearing something. So to prevent that, I'm going to add some lining. So what I'll do is I'll just use all these 3 panels as a template and lay it on top of my lining and just cut out matching pieces for them. It's not a necessity. If your fabric is thick enough and it's not going to be see-through, just ignore what I do for the lining. If you're like me and it is going to be see-through, then you can just follow along. Now we should be up to the same point where we've got these 6 pieces of material but 3 panels for the skirt. First thing we're going to do to start assembling it is join them at the side seams. For these side seams, I'm actually going to show you how to do a French seam. It's just a nice little fun way to keep the seams nice and clean. We're just going to make the center seam a normal one so we can access that extra bit of fabric to hide the zipper in. We'll just focus on one side at a time and do the lining and the main material at the same time. So the difference between a French seam and a regular seam is normally we would just put them straight away good sides to good sides, and then we would have a raw hem in there. But what instead a French seam does is we lay it so the bad sides are facing. So see here how my good sides are facing out and my bad sides, which is my lining, is facing inwards to each other. We're then just going to pin that in place and sew down there pretty much as close as we can to that side edge. So align that, pin it, sew as close as you can to the edge, and then repeat that for the other side. And we'll leave that center seam for the back section open for now, and then we'll meet back here and I'll show you how to finish the French seam. If you're worried that you didn't sew close enough to the edge, this is where you can trim it back so it is nice and close and there's not too much excess fabric in these side seams. We then flip these areas so the good sides are then facing and pin it down to sew a second seam in the exact place. If you want, it might be a good time to iron it, or you can just pull it as I have and pin it in place before you sew. Once you've got it to a point where you're happy, just sew down about 1/2 inch from the edge, and then once you've done that on both sides, you'll see that you have 2 clean seam edges, so you don't need to do any overlocking or zigzagging stitches to get them all clean, as they're all ready to go. Next, we're going to focus on adding the zipper in. Where these 2 edges of the center back seam meet, we'll focus on one side and lay down the zipper good side facing the good side of the fabric and align the edge. If you align the top of the zip to the top of the fabric, that should give you enough seam allowance for us to add the waistband in later. Pin it in place and then sew straight down there. If you're like me and don't have a zipper foot, that's totally fine. You can just make sure that you sew on the very outer edge and that will keep it nice and straight. And like me, you might need to stop halfway through and just move the zip section out of the way. Once you've done that first side, it is now time to do the other side. Now obviously we've got the zip attached to the skirt, so just move it all over so that the zip can lay good sides facing on that other edge of the fabric and pin it in place, and then just sew one straight line down there. Obviously the way that we have done this, you can still see the zipper, so I'm just going to shift these little edges of the fabric to create an extended fold over the top of the zip, so then it will hide underneath there. Ideally where that folded edge is will be center of the zip and they'll evenly be over there, so have a play around with that until you get them to the point where you're happy. Pin it in place, and then we're just going to sew from that top edge down to pretty much where the zipper starts to split, because that's where we'll then continue sewing that center seam. Once we've done that, we'll then flip the garment so it's good sides facing and that these edges of the center seam are meeting. And pretty much where we stopped for the zipper part, we'll then continue sewing down to the bottom, and that will create our center seam. We can then flip it back outside and finish that little bottom section there if you want that to be a nice square edge. So once we have completed sewing down that back center seam from the zipper down to the bottom, we are up to the next step, which is taking in that waist area so it hugs there more. Currently it's just kind of one big box, and I'm sure if you try it on you'll see that it's massively oversized, so we'll be adding some dart points in the front and dart points in the back to help bring it all in and shape our body better. We need to measure our waist, and then once we figure out that amount, we'll then measure the top of the skirt. And obviously we need to take away the difference of those 2 measurements. For me, currently the top of this skirt is 44 inches circumference, and my waist area is 31 inches. So I need to get this down to 31 inches. So if I minus 31 from 44, that leaves me with 13 inches that I need to take in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that into 4. Obviously it's an odd number, so I'm just going to have a little play around. On the back side, I'm going to have 2 dart points on the fold at 1.5 inches. So all up the back side takes in 6 inches. And then on this front side, I'm going to take 2 dart points at 1.75 inches on the fold, and that way it'll take up 7 inches all up on this front section. All up they will make a total of 13 inches, which is what I needed to take in to get it to fit me at the waist. So how we do that is we flip the skirt inside out, and for me I'm just going to find the center point of the skirt itself, and then the center point of one half and the center point of the other half, and that's where I'm then going to place these dart points. So once I've figured that out, I'll then fold it in half on one of those points and just act like I'm sewing a normal seam down there. Although instead of it being one straight line, we're going to set in by the amount that we figured out. So for me at the front, it's going to be 1.75 inches. Mark a point there. And then we need to grab the measuring tape again and figure out the measurement from our waist down to our widest point. For me, that was my butt, which ends up being about 7 inches. So when I mark it out, I know to go down 7 inches on this side edge. And now that I've got those two reference points, I can either pin or draw a line from those two, and that will be my dart that I sew in place. For my front side dart, I actually did end up sewing all the way down. So instead of ending just there at the dart point, I've continued about 1/4 of an inch off that edge all the way down, as I found when I tried it on, it just kind of pushed out and was a bit bulky at the front. If yours does the same, that might be a little hack that you can do as well. The back side is a little bit easier to find as we've just got a shorter panel, so we can literally just halve that and then again plot that out, and that will be fine for the back. Might be good to try it on and make any adjustments if need be at this stage, and then we will be up to the next step. Now that we've got this top section fitting our waist nice and snug, we are now going to add a waistband onto this section that extends past the zipper area, and we'll add a button on there to keep it nice and secure. So once again, grab our measuring tape. Ideally this would be that waist measurement that we got, but we'll just double check anyway. So keep pulling the measuring tape all the way around that circumference, and once we have that measurement, we'll then add 4 inches. And that's going to be enough for seam allowance and also for that overhang section that we can add the button onto. So that's going to be our cutting length of the waistband. Now we need to figure out the height of it. So whatever finishing height you want it to be, say if you want it to be about 2 inches, we're going to double that, which will be 4 inches, and then we'll add 1 inch for seam allowance. I want mine to be about 1.5 inches, so again, I'll double it to 3 inches, add 1 inch for seam allowance. So my cutting width is going to be 4 inches. And my cutting length is going to be 33 inches. Grab your excess fabric, mark out that rectangle that you figured out, and then we'll meet back here to then assemble the waistband. Once you've cut out a panel to these dimensions, we'll then fold it so the good sides are facing in. So we'll start at one end, sew the short end, and then sew about 1/3 across that longer side and stop. We'll repeat that on the other side, and that little opening that we've left there is what we're going to push the good sides out through. Grab your paintbrush or something similar that you can then place at these closed ends and push them out so that the good sides reveal. Once you've got that out, we'll then attach it onto the waistband section of the skirt. So we'll start from the back side and align one edge so that they're nice and flush. Pin it so the good sides are facing, and continue all around that circumference until you get to the other end. You should have about 2 to 3 inches of overhang, and that's where we're going to add the button section on. Now that it's pinned in place, just sew that one line all the way across there, and then it's time to add the button on. First, we're going to create the buttonhole. We'll grab our button, put it over the top of this overhang section, and place a mark on either end of the button to show us how wide we need the buttonhole to be. You can either do this buttonhole horizontal or vertical. There's no right or wrong way, whatever you prefer, and also how wide this section is versus how much room you need for your button. Draw a line from dot to dot, and that will be the size of the interior of the hole. If you don't have a buttonhole foot or a buttonhole setting on your machine, you can just follow my steps and switch your machine to a zigzag and make a frame around this line. So we'll add one line directly above it, one line all the way down the side of it, another line below it, and then another line to the left of it, so then it creates a square all around it. If you have a buttonhole setting or a button foot, you can just go ahead and use that instead. Once you've sewn that there, we'll then cut that hole open, so start in the center and just kind of cut your way out. Take this nice and slow because you don't want to accidentally cut your thread that you've just sewn. Now that we do have that buttonhole, we can use that as a guide to then figure out where to place the button on the under section. So grab your pencil or fabric chalk and just lay the buttonhole section over the top of where you want the button to sit and put a mark through this hole, and that will help indicate where we're going to place this button. Grab your hand needle, some thread and your button, and then we'll just simply put a thread onto the needle, tie a knot at the end, probably do a triple or quadruple knot so that it doesn't go through the material. Start from the other side, go through the button and do this loop a few times until it feels nice and secure on there. Go back out the end and then do a few knots there again so that it's nice and secure and in place. So there we go, we should have our buttonhole and our waistband all added into the skirt. It's probably becoming a formed garment. Now the final step is we will just focus on this bottom hem, so you might want to try it on one last time so you can figure out how much to take in to get it to the length that you want. Once you figure that out, we'll then flip the garment inside out. We'll do one smaller hem first, so that will be about 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch wide, and just fold it, pin that down and then sew one line to hold that in place. Then once you've done that, we'll do the second hem, which will probably be a little bit larger or however much you need it to get it to the point of the length that you want. Again, we'll pin it in place and sew one line all around there, and then what we'll end up with is a cute pencil skirt ready to wear out and about. If you did follow along this tutorial, I hope you did enjoy it. It has been such a fun process bringing this to life, such a simple piece just to have in any wardrobe. Style this down with some sneakers, keep it nice and casual, but also then wear some boots and dress up and make it a little bit fancy. I'm really excited to add this to the wardrobe. Once again, I just really want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to jump on that offer, which is in the description below, for the first 1,000 people to click through and sign up. Time to try this baby on and take it out into the wild. Wherever you are, I hope you are having a beautiful day, and I will see you guys in the upcoming tutorials.